initial fundraiser list of goals. If you go back to that page, you'll see these things discussed, and we accomplished most of these things. That there's a tilde next to the things that we sort of accomplished. Like, we did not ever write a Qt Lua GUI, but we have a Neovim Qt project that is reaching maturity, and we never implemented a fancy. We're still using the basic writing raw term codes through screen.c. We don't have any sort of. We're not using any sort of terminal UI abstraction like Lua POSIX or libticket. So we didn't do that, and we probably won't. But all these other major goals from the initial fundraiser were accomplished. And just generally, the goals for Neovim are embedding as a first-class concept, plugin compatibility with Vim, which I mentioned, more powerful GUIs, that is in full swing. We have over at least 10 GUIs that have been implemented in different languages and platforms, and an RPC API that allows you to extend the project in any language, and that has been achieved. The original estimate for the original fundraiser goal was 1 month. I think this is hilarious. It took 2 years to achieve. But if we had known that at the time, probably no one would have even bothered. So it's a good thing that it was underestimated in some sense. And I like to think of it as we're commoditizing Vim. We're going from capital V Vim to lowercase Vim. Vim as a component. I touched on this a bit earlier, but I think of it as we're preserving Vim. In an interview a couple years ago, Bram Molinar was asked, what can people do to ensure the future of Vim? And he said, keep me alive. So I think of Neovim as keeping Bram alive. We're keeping him alive by keeping his spirit alive, by preserving his code and loving it. So refactoring is a major thrust of Neovim. It's painful, boring, but it's necessary. For these reasons, it attracts new devs, it encourages existing devs to follow better practices, and it builds a foundation for the next 20 years of development, instead of just sort of chipping away at it. We've taken a really aggressive approach. We have a very sophisticated CI system built around it. We build on 2 different versions of OS 10, we build on FreeBSD. This is automated with every single commit, and Linux and Windows, and I think a couple other platforms. Refactoring is not an end in itself. It's a way of getting to where we want to go. It has risks, which were pointed out early on in the project. It could introduce new bugs. And another risk that, is always on my mind is that if we take too long, then it might end up being pointless, because if we take too long with this goal of preserving Vim from the inside out, if you take too long doing that, then what happens is eventually the only other way to achieve what our end goal is to go from the outside in. And that's the approach that most Vim-like or fancy editors like Z Editor, if you've heard of that, it's a project that's from a guy at Google. It's written in Rust. But Atom, VS Code, these are new editors with new designs, and they're also very extensible. But that's the outside-in approach. And to reach the same goal from the outside-in approach is you're re-implementing all of the important pieces of Vim. So it's like a race. It's like we're trying to reach a better design by refactoring the existing code, and they started out with a better design, and they're trying to re-implement all the things that are important about this text editor that we like. So, if we take too long, then, which is fine, because in the end, as long as you reach the goal, it doesn't really matter how you get there. But my suspicion, which is why I think Neovim is worth working on, my suspicion is that they may never get there, because these new editors are popping up constantly. Why is that? Well, apparently the fancy new designs are not good enough for a bunch of people, so these people keep on creating new editors with better designs and stuff like that. So someone should just settle on design and get to work on actually making a text editor instead of always creating new text editors. Assuming your goal is like a productivity application and not just academic. So I'll just go through some criticism here. I'm going to try and make this fast because I know I'm running out of time. But there's like 5 different very common retorts about Neovim. Like one was like people moaned when we removed support for platforms. Well, it turns out that no one was even using some of these platforms that we removed, but people just automatically said, why did you do this? It's great that Vim runs on these platforms, but it didn't run on the platforms and no one was using them. So, and that eventually was borne out because Vim itself removed the support for a couple of those platforms later on. Not all of them. I mean, Vim still supports more platforms than Neovim. Let me be clear about that. For example, I don't think we build on Herd, and I think Vim does build on Herd. And there's a couple other architectures that Debian packages build against that we don't build against. The limiting factor there is Luajit. Luajit actually doesn't build on some of these obscure platforms that Vim does. And Luajit is going to be a core dependency eventually. Some people say, there's talk that there's a rivalry, but it's really not. There's loud advocates on each side that are just having their own conversation, while the devs, the Neovim devs and the Vim devs are not having this conversation. We're just writing code, and occasionally patches find their way into each project from the other. Well, we always eventually merge every Vim patch, and occasionally Vim merges some of our patches as well. Another criticism is that we divided the developers. Well, probably not, because activity on Vim dev didn't really change one way or the other based on past activity, and it seems pretty obvious that just from talking to people who are contributing to Neovim that they wouldn't have contributed to Vim at all if the Neovim project didn't exist. So to say that it's splitting developers doesn't make sense. The other reason that it doesn't make sense to say that we're splitting developers is that we still merge Vim patches. So the work that's being done on Vim is work that is being included in Neovim work. So the development is not split in that sense either. And another criticism is that we divide the community, but again, it's not a zero-sum outcome. And the activity and the discussions and the collaboration and the insights into Vimisms that has happened on GitHub simply would not have happened on the Vim use mailing list, period. I mean, these people aren't signing up for the mailing list. They wouldn't have signed up, and so it's not like anything was lost from the community. All that happened was that the the net total discussion and knowledge sharing of Vim knowledge increased. That's what happened. So it's really difficult to make the argument that we divided the community. It seems more just like that we increased the visibility of the community. And another reason that I think that is because every time there's discussion about Vim, we get more activity. And every time there's discussion about Neovim, Vim gets more activity. So what happened is that Neovim raised the visibility of Vim. So it was a net win for the project, in my opinion. Some people say we're bloating things by adding certain features. Well, the terminal itself comes out to around 1,000 or 2,000 lines of code, like total that were added to the code base, and that's not even counting like the code that we removed, because Vim itself has a feature called shell. It has this shell feature, which is like, it is itself, it's a anemic implementation of a terminal that's inside Vim. But not even counting that, I mean, we removed, just by removing the built-in GUIs, we removed 56,000 lines of code. So, we have a surplus of 56,000 lines of code that we can do whatever we want before you can even say that we bloated anything. And if you buy that argument. And you can think of it as like, imagine that you started out with the Neovim code base, which is this lean core. It's extensible through RPC. It doesn't have any built-in GUIs. And then you said, oh, let's write a bunch of C code and add built-in GUIs for every single platform. That would be bloat. So, but we didn't do that. We did add terminal. And terminal is really useful. I'll get into more of that later. You can also just do a general comparison of the code bases. Vim has about 300,000 lines of C code. Neovim clocks in around 200,000. Some people say it's going to turn out like XEmacs. Well, if you believe Steve Yagi, the reason XEmacs failed was because it had too many bugs. It had lots of features, but it also had lots of bugs. And I personally have been maybe a little bit too cautious about that since the beginning, because I read these words years ago and I was worried about it. And I've been as vigilant as I possibly can to make sure that we aren't introducing regressions. And we haven't been completely successful. That regressions have happened, but we take them seriously. We always cover them with tests where it's even remotely possible. And we have a continuous integration system running to help us avoid introducing bugs. So I'm going to start getting into some of the features of Neovim. Stop talking about the meta. We want to introduce Lua as a first-class alternative to VimScript for end users to use. VimScript will never go away. We're always going to support it, but we want Lua to be an alternative that is regarded with the same respect as VimScript. And also, we want to script features in the core in Lua. We want to stop writing C code to do business logic like switching a buffer or setting a window layout. That shouldn't be in C. There's no reason for that to be in C. It's not performance critical. And it always ends up that even in VimDev, whenever like a new function is added, someone forgets to check like the type val to string, the TV to string function, like they have to check that it's null and they forget to, or something. It's like stupid. It's just like bugs that they exist because of the challenges of writing just business logic in C. And even world-class experts make mistakes in C. It happens all the time. And Bram himself has mentioned that he wants to look into ways to avoid C And I don't think he's going to start writing Lua to implement features, but he did mention maybe using Zimbu, which is the language that he invented to implement features. Just briefly, so we have not taken ownership of every single Vim legacy module. We've only taken ownership of some. We're pretty comfortable owning eval. We definitely have refactored large parts of screen. File I/O is completely different. And the OS layer now is based on libuv, obviously. None of that is, it's not directly implemented using the cstdlib. We're also taking ownership of marks, messages, pop-up menu, and a few others. But like, we haven't really touched any of these modules. And we don't plan to until it becomes like directly related to our goals at the time. So these modules continue to be maintained, in my mind, by Vim dev developers. We take their like they fix bugs, they add features, we take their patches. So we are combining our efforts, even if it is not directly part of the goals of Vim dev. This is more of the same, I guess. So, I have a few slides on what I call dev features. These are not features, these are dev features. I think it's pretty clear now that tools do matter. This was a criticism in the beginning, like, well, why did you switch to CMake? Who cares about GitHub? It doesn't matter what VCS you use, but it'd be interesting to know. I don't have any data on this, but I suspect that Vim started to see increased patch submissions after it moved to Git and GitHub. And as I already mentioned earlier, the explosion of contributions to Neovim seems like pretty clear evidence that tools do matter, because those are contributions that most likely would not have been made to Vim itself. CMake has real benefits. Another thing is that we have a test system that allows us to assert actual screen layout. So if I want to test how this wild menu looks, you can't do that with legacy Vim tests. You can do it with a screen test. And that's really powerful. We use that heavily for our testing. And that's a key, that is a key piece of avoiding regressions, so that we avoid XEmax's fate. Although, we might still meet XEmax's fate, but it won't be because we have too many bugs or too many regressions, I hope. Our development cycle differs from Vim in that we have, an informal design phase. When you send a PR, there's a place to add comments for anyone to add comments, and the collaboration there is evident to me that it enables much better collaboration where you can do line-by-line comments, and this is obvious to anyone who uses GitHub. Oops. But well, anyways, I don't have an internet connection. But in this PR, you can see this is a good example, but there's many others like this where someone lays out a design, asks for feedback, and achieve this as effectively on a mailing list. Starts with a to-do list. And implements the to-do list, commit by commit. Another real tangible result of the refactoring, besides just having pretty code, is that we can use C99 features, and we can use advanced compiler features, which help static analysis. Coverity and ClangScan are able to find bugs that you wouldn't otherwise be able to find, because we have annotated many functions with these advanced compiler attributes that will they mark functions as, you know, not allowing null arguments, or the result must be checked, things like that. So end user features. Job start is the job control feature. It's the central entry point to the job control feature. Then now has something similar. If you're not familiar with it, then let me just demonstrate it. This is a legacy syntax. Okay, so this is just a demonstration of job control. It's an asynchronous job working in the background, appending to the buffer that I'm navigating in. There's a lot more you can do with that, but another key feature is remote plugins. And this is, so we ship with our runtime a small framework that enables any external process platform, such as Haskell, Erlang. Someone wrote an Erlang adapter. There's a common Lisp adapter that is has been seeing a lot of activity, development activity. You register as a plugin with Neovim, and then it can it works like a regular plugin. And there's even a Haskell plugin that allows you to write plugins in Haskell. It's a Haskell adapter that allows you to write plugins in Haskell. And what those plugins do is they wrap the Neovim API. So all these functions are, this is the entire Neovim API currently that's exposed to remote processes. And with this, using this API, they can draw the screen, like in the same layout that you see in Neovim. They can manipulate buffers, manipulate windows, manipulate variables. It's similar to what you can do with like the Python interface that ships with Vim, but it's generalized so that any language can be implemented on top of it. Embed is supported through this embed argument, and when you call Neovim with the embed argument, it turns standard input and standard